Water is essential to our lives. That's why it's disturbing to learn that the aging infrastructure that provides our water is crumbling. Our next guest will help us learn about the problem and what we can do to address it. Michael Power is Senior Director of State Government Affairs, Southern Region for the American Chemistry Council. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I think people who just heard what I said are thinking, wait a minute, our water infrastructure is crumbling, it's in danger. What do we need to know about this?
Right. Well, we sort of are reaching a tipping point when it comes to water infrastructure. A lot of people think about infrastructure needs and they focus on roads and bridges and things of that nature, mass transit. But really, our water infrastructure has been in the ground for a very long time, and it has reached its useful life. The American Society of Civil Engineers has done a lot of research, grading and scoring most of the nation's water infrastructure, and I think they give our nation about a D- when it relates to water piping material, and that is just because it's reached its life. We average about 250,000 breaks a year nationally in this country, and so it's a big challenge with a lot of water loss and water contamination as a result.
You mentioned the breaks, and I'm guessing that for most of us, that's about the only time we think about this water infrastructure is when there is a line break. But just because we don't see the break doesn't mean that there's some issues that need to be resolved.
No, absolutely. I mean, a break is a big time event. You may have a loss of water at your house, or you may have an inconvenience on your commute to your way to work. But oftentimes there are leaks that go unnoticed and can lead to some contamination in the water that you drink at your house.
So what do we need to know about getting the processes in place to improve this situation?
Right. So the federal and state government both do a lot, provide a lot of resources to help improve and replace water infrastructure. What we've seen over the last 20 years, and the federal government has given about $42 billion to help small rural communities improve their water infrastructure needs, but that's not enough. The American Society of Civil Engineers, as I mentioned, estimated about $1 trillion in needed pipe replacement over the next 20 years. And so we need to find ways to become more efficient with the resources that we have available. And that's one of the things that we would like to talk about with this group this afternoon is open competition. What we have found is that a lot of utilities, about 75% in fact, across the country, not only have defined their standards needed to meet for water pipes, but then they also go a step further and mandate the use of one material. And what that does in the bid process is it restricts companies and other materials that could compete in that space from bidding, which is in fact driving up costs, which is negatively impacting the ratepayers and our ability to replace pipes in a timely manner.
And these restrictions or bid requirements are not ones that necessarily are needed to get a product in the ground that works?
Correct. And in fact, a lot of rural communities in the state of North Carolina and across the country use the USDA Rural Water Program to replace their water infrastructure. And that program requires open competition and even the use of the low-cost bid, which is not what we're asking for. We want just competition of a variety of products that can meet those standards and provide safe, clean, affordable drinking water to their consumers.
We are chatting with Michael Power, Senior Director of State Government Affairs, Southern Region for the American Chemistry Council. This is a program, many of the people who listen to it will hear competition, free markets, and think, yeah, that's great, that's what we need. Do existing government rules really stand in the way of this competition taking effect and helping us meet this need?
So generally what we see in the marketplace is at the state level, they say in their procurement policies that no brand-specific barriers can be put in place. However, when you come into water infrastructure, you generally see that they refer to the local manual or the local ordinance as the de facto rule and policy that's in place. And that's where the issue arises. We see at the local level with the utility or even in that small city, depending on how that structure is established, that they have material specification in there which prohibits and restricts the marketplace.
So this is less of an issue, it sounds like, of state level policy and more what local governments across the state or across various states are doing.
Right, and it sort of the tie-in to the state piece, though, is when they are using the state money to replace that water infrastructure. So it's sort of the local precedent, but then using state funds to help fund the infrastructure replacement.
So what do we do about it?
Well, what we would like to do is we've been working the last few years on policy that would create open competition. So essentially all we're asking for is that when a bid is put out, the local engineer designs all the performance standards needed for that system to operate safely and effectively. When the bid goes out, they have those performance standards established, but they do not close it off to a certain material. So allowing multi-materials to bid, because there's iron, there's PVC, there's polyethylene, and concrete pipe that can compete in these marketplaces. So once those bids go out, we want the local engineer to review all those bids, and at the end of the day, they have the opportunity to select the bid and the material that is best suited for their environment.
And it sounds as if some of the people listening to us, I think, are going to say to themselves, wait a minute, it sounds like they're trying to cut some corners here and maybe get some material in the ground that's not going to be as good as what we're used to. Our local government has set a good standard. But it sounds as if you were saying that there are a number of different types of material that will actually accomplish the same goal, and there's no safety concern about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the materials that we are promoting and advocating for are approved by ASTM and the American Water Works Association to be used in these applications. So this wouldn't, allow anything like we've heard a paper pipe. We wouldn't allow paper pipes to be installed in the ground.
How much competition would be facilitated if these local restrictions are out of the way? Are there going to be a lot more players in these various communities who would be willing to come in and do the work?
Yes. There are a number of other product materials that are available, all readily available through a local distributor here in the state and across the nation. So really the materials are already available and around. It's just getting that opportunity for them to bid and to be used in that process. So generally we've seen two materials that are preferred. This would create a new opportunity for two other materials really to come in there and participate.
Usually when we hear about competition and the availability of more options, there's a positive impact on the price to the
Sure.
consumer. What kind of impact are you expecting on prices for these communities?
So we've done a lot of studies around the country. We did one here in North Carolina, and we saw about, I think it was on average about a 30%. I think it was between 26 and 45% cost savings when competition was allowed versus when closed bidding was taking place. We looked at two communities in the state. The open bid city, they were saving about $150,000 per mile of installed pipe over the closed bid city. And what was most interesting from that data, there was a 2015 study that we conducted. The city that was open bidding was putting in about 30,000 feet of pipe, and half of it was plastics and half of it was metal or concrete. So they were using multi-material and saving that much, $150,000 per mile over a closed bid city.
In the brief amount of time that we have left, is there a particular first step that needs to happen to move this process forward? Is there a state level policy that needs to take
Right.
place?
So yeah, we are working with the legislature on a state level policy. We're working on this in about 5 of their states as well. And essentially, all the legislation does is it asks that when state dollars are being used, local communities and utilities allow for open bid, open competition processes so that we can make sure that we're best using taxpayer dollars in the state of North Carolina and others.